Hi, it's Penny here, and today I wanted to tell you all about the books that I read in October. And I am going to do this book battle style as I have been doing recently, which means that I basically pair up all the books that I read and battle them against each other until we come up with the champion of the month. So this month our book battle is basically divided into two branches. We've got the more YA section and then we've got an adult section. The adult section is all fantasy. And then on the other side we've got a little dystopian branch as well as a section which is all fantasy, and those fantasies I would probably say are on the lower end of YA, so they're almost middle grade if not middle grade. So I will leave timestamps to the different battles if you want to jump to particular sections, but let's get into round one. So firstly we've got The Silver Mask by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare up against Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. Both of these are fourth books in a series. So The Silver Mask is the fourth book in the Magisterium series, where we're following this boy named Cole, who initially didn't want to get into magic school because he'd heard it was a terrible place, but then he did end up going and he learned a lot about the world. I've really felt like this series has just gotten better and better as it went along, and in this particular book we're really looking into the morality of whether it would be okay to bring someone back to life from the dead. The main character is put in some really difficult decisions where I don't think it's really clear what is the right thing to do, and I think that was done really well. I also really like the way that the magic in this world is being explored, especially in regards to what has been called chaos magic, but more and more I'm thinking of it as soul magic. And I have just started right today in November, started listening to the last book in that series, and I'm really excited to see how the series is going to wrap up. Then Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth. These books are always just a lot of fun. We're basically following Percy Jackson, who is the son of a Greek god and a mortal woman, and in every book he goes on a different quest, and it does a really good job of incorporating Greek mythology into everyday life. As well, it has a lot of great lessons about friendship, and this particular book had a very strong environmentalist theme, and I do think that's done very well in a way where it's not bashing you over the head with the lessons, but just like introducing you to concepts that I think as a younger person would really set you up to be a good person. So I definitely recommend these books for younger people, and I can see why a lot of people who read these when they were younger really love them. I think as well they do a really great job of having lots of plot threads going on through the book and bringing them all together at the end. The only thing I would say is, as an older person reading them, I don't really relate to the characters, but that's not really a criticism of the book because I am not the demographic, and I'm sure I would have related if I was younger. And as I said, I still had a lot of fun reading this book. So it's actually really hard to decide what would be the winner of this battle. I feel like when I was a kid, I probably would have liked Percy Jackson better, but as an adult, I quite like the questions of morality being asked in The Silver Mask. I guess this is my book battle, so I'm going to pick the one that I liked better, and that's The Silver Mask. While I do think the Percy Jackson books are a lot of fun, I never find them particularly surprising. So Silver Mask is through to the next round. Okay, and then already we're on to round two. So this is going to be our dystopian battle. We've got The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins up against The Toll by Neal Shusterman. So firstly, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games series, where we're following the evil president from the original series, Cornelius Snow. This is during the 10th Hunger Game, and he is a mentor for one of the competitors in the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games are still quite in their infancy, so they're not as elaborate as the ones in the Hunger Games, and they're not as well attended. So Cornelius and the other mentors are trying to come up with ways to really make the Hunger Games more effective. To be honest, I don't feel like it ever really explained properly why the Hunger Games had been started. Like, I still don't feel like I can picture the first Hunger Games happening and people being willing to go along with it. I know it was supposed to be following this horrible war and it's supposed to be a punishment, but people on both sides of the war suffered, and I just feel like if you suffered, why would you then go, yeah, I really do want their children to have to fight to the death? It seems weird, and nobody in the Capitol seemed to have a good reason for why they were doing the Hunger Games or even be interested in watching it. And any of the explanations that were included in the book for why they were doing it not really that great. So I just feel like overall, the longer that it's been since I read this book, the less I really care about what happened in it. It was fine. Like, I had seen a lot of really terrible reviews for it, and I don't think it was terrible. It just wasn't very interesting, and compared to the Hunger Games, it was definitely a disappointment. I mean, there were some interesting bits, but overall I felt like it was lacking a direction and a general cohesiveness. It was just a bunch of things happening without much flow. It was definitely more interesting when we were talking about the events in the games, but that was only actually quite a small part of the book. The main character's motivations weren't very interesting and didn't really seem to line up in any way with where we know he ends up in the original Hunger Games books. Like, I thought something really bad would happen to him that would lead him to be radicalized into these crazy ideas, but not really. I thought the whole love interest thing was completely unbelievable. Like, I could see why he might like her, but why would she like him? Pretty sure she wouldn't. Anyway, in general, that's my summary. So the other book in this battle is The Toll by Neal Shusterman. This is the third and final book in the Scythe series. So this is set in a utopian world where people no longer die. And because of this, they have had to find a way to keep population under control. So they have created this role of the Scythes who go around killing people off. Now, as it turns out, these Scythes are pretty corrupted, and unfortunately the AI that rules the world is not allowed to interfere with how the Scythes work. So this third book was really much more focused on the AI, what was going on with that, and people discovering some of this corruption. It's kind of hard to talk about the third book in a series. I do think that this final book did explain some of the problems I had with the initial two books and the world building in those, but overall I still think the world building is incredibly flawed. It makes the assumption that there are no humans that would realize that certain problems were going on, which I just don't believe. They repeat over and over again that the Thunderhead, this AI that rules the world, is infallible. Even the AI itself says that it's infallible, but there's no real evidence for, like, why would it be infallible? It's a computer. Even if it knows everything in the world, it still can't predict the future. Of course it's fallible. It just, so many times there were statements of fact that didn't make sense. And it really frustrated me that this is supposed to be this utopian world, but it wasn't in any way, and I don't know why any humans would really believe that it was. There were a lot of ideas and themes included in the book that weren't really explored in any kind of depth, or at least not to the depth that I would have expected in a book like this. I do know it's YA, but I still thought that it would give us more. And I would also say, like, so YA books often focus more on the relationships between people, but each book in this series adds more and more characters, and I feel like we get less and less of the actual relationships. I also don't really think Neal Shusterman is that great at writing relationships. So I guess in the end, this was actually my favorite book of the series. I do think it did some interesting things, and it did address some of the problems I had with the series, but I still just get annoyed when I think about the world building and how many problems I have with it. So, like, the overall plot of this book was okay, but I think it was balanced out with my frustration with the world building and the lack of exploration of the ideas and themes in the book. I do think for people who haven't read a lot of science fiction, that a lot of these ideas might be new, and so maybe the flawed world building wouldn't annoy them as much. And still, I would say, putting this up against The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, The Toll is still definitely the winner. It was much more enjoyable. It did have some interesting ideas, even if I didn't think it took them far enough. So The Toll moves on to the next round. Okay, then our next battle is between Soulbinder by Sebastian de Castell up against The Silver Mask by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare. So Soulbinder is another fourth book in the series. Apparently, I mostly read fourth books in a series this month. You know, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, sort of a fourth book in a series too. So I read 4 fourth books in a series. So again, this is kind of hard to talk about. In the first book of this series, we followed this boy named Cal. The Silver Mask main character is Cole, so I always get confused. But Cal in the first book was just lining up to do his magic exams, and then his magic started disappearing. So he has ended up going off and exploring a whole bunch of different places. In this series, almost every book introduces a whole new cast of characters because Cal travels to somewhere new. We get a whole bunch of new characters, generally almost a whole new magic system on top of all the previous magic systems that we've learnt before. So there's a lot going on. And I would say this is really exciting, but it's also just a little bit overwhelming. The book is very action-packed, and so there's always something happening. It's very fast-paced, but it's just like one thing after the other, and sometimes I'm like, can we just calm down and pause for a moment? Also in this one, I did miss the Argosy influence that we've had in some of the previous books. So the Argosy in this book series are these, I guess, traveling philosophers that also have a whole bunch of different abilities and their own magic system in some ways. And I've really enjoyed the Argosy philosophy. There was still a little bit of it in this book, but we didn't have a certain character included that has been our main Argosy influence from the previous books. Still, there are 2 more books for me to read in this series, and I am excited to read them, especially because the last magic system that was introduced is one that I am particularly interested in, and I thought it was very creative. So, comparing the Silver Mask to Soulbinder, I did enjoy them both, and I feel like my gut feel is to say I liked the Silver Mask better. However, I think I would also say that all the elements of Soulbinder were much more creative. It's very action-packed and fast-paced and funny. And as well, I do feel quite connected to the characters, or at least a little bit. Maybe not completely, but again, that's because I'm not really the demographic. So I actually think I'm going to put Soulbinder through to the next round. Okay, so then finally we're moving on to the more adult part of this book battle. For this battle, we have The Black Prism by Brent Weeks up against The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. So The Black Prism, I had an audiobook hold on this for 6 months before it finally came through, so I was super excited to finally get to this. It's set in a world where people are able to do magic based on different colors. Most people can only use magic of one color, some can use 2 or 3. And the Black Prism is this very powerful person who can use all the colors. As well, he's kind of a religious figure, but we learn in, I think, the first chapter that this particular Black Prism has his brother imprisoned in his basement, and his brother had the same power. Now, before the events of this book, there was some big war, potentially over a woman between these 2 brothers, and that's why one of them's locked in the basement. We also follow a character who is the bastard son of the Black Prism, but there's a whole bunch of mystery there. Black Prism definitely has a bunch of secrets, and I am still not entirely sure whether the reason for him locking his brother in the basement is entirely good or not. I really loved the way that the secrets were revealed throughout the story. I thought the magic system was super cool. The world building is amazing. Sometimes it has like a subtle sense of humor that I really liked. I actually think if you like Brandon Sanderson, this is very similar in the magic system, the world building, the humor, the easy to read writing style. The only thing I would perhaps warn about is there is a lot of like boob talk, and it does fit in the story. Our main character is a little bit misogynistic, and he's called out on that a few times, so it's not like it isn't called out, but just some of the descriptions feel a little bit unnecessary. Also, the bastard son of this Black Prism is a larger boy, a fat boy, and I do think some people won't enjoy the way that that's represented. I didn't think it was too bad myself. Like, I think it's saying this is who he is, and sometimes it's an advantage and sometimes it's a disadvantage, but overall I thought it was quite realistic, and most of the people who treat him badly because of his weight are quite clearly not the good people. So overall, I really enjoyed The Black Prism. I just think that some people might want to be careful going into it. Then The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. So this is the 3rd book in the Broken Earth trilogy. In this world, we're having constant apocalypses. The world is essentially broken. And we also have these people who have these earth-type magical powers. They're able to stop earthquakes, but also cause them. And because of this, people are very afraid of them, and they're treated very badly. There is a school where they go and are essentially treated like slaves in order to keep people safe. But whenever they're discovered outside the school, they're attacked and just treated very badly. In the first book, we were following a girl who was new to her powers, a girl who was attending the school, and a woman who was chasing after her husband and her daughter after her husband had killed her child because her husband discovered that this child had these magical powers. Of course, in this third book, everything has changed. So much has happened since then. Primarily we're following the mother and the daughter, and they are heading sort of to the same place but with very different goals. We learn a lot more about what happened to cause this civilization to break down and all these apocalypses to start happening. We learn a lot more about the magic system, and there's just a lot more about the world that we learn in this particular book. The ending was very satisfying. I loved how everything came together. It just took things to such epic proportions. The only thing I will say about this, so I really loved the writing style. I thought the way that it played with language was beautiful and so interesting, but the warning is that it is written for the most part in second person, which means it's referring to you all the time. And it makes sense in the context of the story why it would do this, but I know that for some people it's difficult to read, so be forewarned. But if you like writing that plays with different ways of expressing things, then I think you would really love this. Okay, so this is another difficult battle. I don't know who should win, the Black Prism or the Stone Sky. I really enjoyed them both. There were a lot of surprises through both of them. They both had really creative magic systems. They both had really great characters put in difficult situations. I guess if anything, I would mark the Black Prism down a little bit for some of the way it dealt with sensitive topics and just all that boob talk that I didn't really need. Whereas the Stone Sky is really great at addressing themes of treating our environment better and having a sustainable civilization, as well as looking at oppression and the effects of that. So, okay, for that, I'm going to put the Stone Sky through to the next round. Okay, so now we're on to the semi-finals. We've got The Toll by Neal Shusterman up against Soulbinder by Sebastien de Castell. Now, for those of you who've listened to me rant about The Toll and all the problems I had with it, you might think this should be easy. And maybe it is. I was definitely frustrated with some parts of The Toll, but I don't think the actual plot of the final book in the series was that bad. I think given the previous two books in the series, was pretty much what you should have expected. Soulbinder, though, is never really what you expect. It always goes in different directions, that series. Like, I never would have predicted where that book would have gone. And it is a lot funnier, probably just generally better written. The characters are definitely more real. Especially their relationships feel a lot more real. I mean, in a lot of ways, I would say a lot of the characters from The Toll are very generic now that I'm thinking about it. They're all kind of similar in their goodness, except for the ones that are evil. So, I think that decides it. I'm going to put Soulbinder by Sebastien de Castell through to the finals. Okay, and then we have The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern up against The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. So, The Starless Sea. This was a very strange story, and I have to be honest, I really regret not having taken notes. Because I read this just as I was really getting into my new job, my brain was already too full of new job things, and so I found this book very hard to follow along with. But I think a lot of that was me, and that if I'd been in a better mental state of mind, I would have done a lot better with this. I definitely think, though, if you didn't like The Night Circus, or you don't in general like books that are very ambiguous and unclear about what's going on, then you probably won't like The Starless Sea. So we're following this boy who finds this book in the library, and when he starts reading it, he realizes that part of the story is his story. So there's a part of the story which tells about him having been very close to this door that went into this secret underground world, which is a world all based around stories and magic. And so he's very upset about having missed out on this opportunity, and he starts investigating this secret society that's involved with this underground world. And things get very strange. A lot of the stories from this book that he originally reads do fit into the bigger story, and there are other books within this story that also fit into this world. There's also a lot of connections between the characters in the real world and the characters in the books, so that's the thing that I really wish I took notes about. Also, there's like symbols, so the key, the bee, the sword, I forget them all, but those all relate to the characters as well. And so if I had taken better notes, I think I would have got more out of this book. Unfortunately, I didn't. However, I still really enjoyed the atmosphere of the book. I really liked the writing style, and I did find there's a romantic thing going on in this book, and I kind of liked it. It wasn't too big in the story, and it just kind of felt right. The story is kind of aimless and it takes a long time to get where it's going, and I think that would definitely frustrate some people, and I've seen reviews where it definitely did frustrate people, but I didn't mind it too much. And I really do think if I'd just taken notes or been able to pay a bit more attention, I would have really loved this. And I'm a little bit annoyed at myself for having kind of ruined it for myself by not having read it at a time when my mind was more ready for it. So putting this up against The Stone Sky, it's not really fair because I would say The Stone Sky also has a lot going on in it, but I read it near the end of the month where my brain was a little bit more ready for things. But I do think like both these books are very creative, but The Stone Sky is more creative in a concrete way. Like the magic system and the technology that has been created for The Stone Sky is amazing. I've never read anything like it. So for that, I'm going to put The Stone Sky through to the finals. So now we are up to the finals, and we have Soulbinder by Sebastian de Castell up against The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. And as usual, when I split the book battle up between YA and adult, it often ends up not being a very fair fight. I can imagine there would be cases where that wouldn't be true, but in this case, it's definitely true. Soulbinder was a lot of fun and a really enjoyable reading experience, and it was very creative, but when you compare it to the masterpiece that is The Stone Sky, the amazing writing that's going on in The Stone Sky, just everything that has been created in that world, as well as the really strong themes that are being explored in The Stone Sky, The Stone Sky just definitely is the winner. So it's going to be the champion of the month, and that is the book battle for October. Do let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about today, because I would love to talk with you more about them down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're doing well, and I will see you next time.